This course was designed with gifted and talented students in mind, but most of the content will be applicable for students and teachers in all ability areas.
Hi, I'm Lisa Van Gemert, and I'm excited to be sharing with you this session, Grouping Without Fear, Small Group Instruction in the Classroom. You know, small group instruction is the coin of the realm right now in pedagogy. We're all expected to do it. And yet, when I meet with teachers, I find that very few of us, if any really, were trained in our teacher preparation programs on exactly how to run a small group. So I've done a lot of research on how do you effectively run a small group and what are some of the best practices for that. And I've put them together in this presentation. I hope you find it useful and I hope you find it really practical. So it turns out that quite a bit about what we need to know about grouping we can learn from FESH. So there are some similarities. Now, we think of fish as swimming in schools, and sometimes they do. But oftentimes what they're doing is what's called shoaling. Shoaling is where they are all swimming together in a group, but they're in all different directions. And a lot of times that's fine, right? Kids are working independently in the classroom. They're all in different directions. But sometimes we don't want them to shoal. Sometimes we want them to school. And to school means that they are swimming all in the same direction in a coordinated manner. Now, the tricky part is that gifted students in particular don't really have a schooling instinct. They're really more shoalers, right? They prefer to work independently or maybe with one close friend whom they trust, but they're not really that interested typically in schooling with the rest of the class. And that can be fine, but sometimes we need them to work with others. And so how can we make that really effective? So let's be groupers. This picture of this fish is actually a fish called a grouper. It's really ugly, but I think it's like so ugly it's cute. So we're just going to go with it. So the first thing I would say is that we as teachers need to lead by example. You know, when I first started teaching, and this was a long time ago in a galaxy far away where we didn't even have copiers. We had mimeograph, really. It was like purple ink. Anyway, when I first started teaching was very much an egg carton kind of mentality, right? Like each teacher was an egg in an egg carton. Don't touch me, I won't touch you. But now we're really more like eggs in an egg basket. And one of the things that can come across very clearly to students is we are telling them we want them to work in a group. We're expecting them to work in a group. We actually assess them on how well they work in a group. And yet we ourselves don't always take ideas from others. We don't always play in a group very well. And so one of the things I would say is that it's really critical to be giving that example to students, saying things like, oh, well, in our team planning, we talked about doing this, or I wasn't really sure how to do this. And so I went and asked some other teachers I know, or I was in a Twitter chat and we did XYZ. So there are a lot of different things that you can do to make it so that you are showing kids that you believe in grouping, not just for them, but also for you as a good practice in collaboration. So even if there's nobody on your campus who thinks like you do, that's okay. Because of the internet, with Facebook groups, Pinterest, Teachers Pay Teachers, all kinds of places like that, you can find like-minded teachers and get ideas from them. Now, the first step in grouping is that you have to decide. You have to decide which type of grouping will work best for that situation, right? Don't let yourself be intimidated by the bias toward small group instruction. You don't need kids working in small groups all the time in order to be effective. Whole group instruction can be effective. So I just want to say this. Whole group instruction is okay. What administrators want is effective teaching engaged learners. If that needs to be done in small groups, great. If whole group instruction works best for this, great. What I'm saying here, the principle is this. Don't let inertia be the thing that pulls you into one grouping strategy over another. Let it be a conscious, explicit decision. I am going to use small groups here because of this. I'm going to have students working independently because that's why this is best. I'm going to be teaching this as a whole group because this is best. And there are ways to decide how to do this, which I'm going to talk about. I want you to keep in mind that grouping is like tofu. So tofu takes on the flavor of whatever it's cooked with. It has no flavor of its own. And small group instruction is the same way. I mean, you can't take a poor teacher and have her divide the kids into groups and all of a sudden you have great teaching. At the same time, you can't take a great teacher and have her only use whole group instruction. All of a sudden she's a terrible teacher or he's a terrible teacher. It doesn't work that way. It takes on the flavor of whatever it's cooked with. So if you're a great teacher, then you are more on your way to good group instruction. Now, great teaching doesn't guarantee good group instruction because it's its own skill. So let's ask some questions. How do we decide whether small group instruction is better, whole group, independent learning, what's going to work out best? One of the questions we have to ask is this: can students benefit from a different perspective? If they can benefit from a different perspective, then small group instruction is typically going to be your best way. That way, they're not hearing only your perspective, only your opinion. Next, is the material new to everyone? If the material is new to everyone, it takes a lot of prep work in order to make grouping, small group instruction appropriate for that. Because typically, if it's new to everyone, there is a possibility of the spreading of misinformation if they're working in small groups. And secondly, there's the opportunity for GT dominance, meaning that a lot of our GT kiddos are already familiar with things that should be new to them. And because of that, if you put them into a small group and they already know it, then they're going to come across as bossy and arrogant when really they're not. We put them in that position. So we need to be careful we're not setting them up for failure. So if it's material that's new to everyone, then that's often where whole group instruction will work best, or teacher designed small group discussion or independent work, right? So I can have students working independently to read something or go watch a video about something or do a QR code hunt where they're going around scanning and reading small bits of information. There are a few different activities that can be done when it's new to everybody, but putting kids into a group and having them learn new material that way will be problematic socially for your GT kids. Is there a chance that kids are going to turn into a tutor? You know, GT kids don't make good tutors, and it's never an appropriate use of a GT kid. Occasionally, you'll have one who wants to be a teacher when they grow up, right? And so they love helping other kids. But one of the issues is that often our gifted learners don't think linearly. And so they don't go from point A to B to C, and then the answer is found at the fourth step, D. Rather, they see the question, and then the answer pops into their head, and they just do this like tesseract over to from step A to step D. And when we ask them to show their work, they're like, what work? I don't have any work. I looked at the question, and the answer magically appeared in my head. And so if we have them help other kids, that's problematic, right? Because the other kids need step B, step C. Sometimes we as teachers need them to show step B and step C, but it can be a problem. So if there's a chance that a GT kid's going to turn into a tutor, or even another kid's going to turn into a tutor, we might need to rethink whether that's great for small group instruction at the time. Are you prepared to give some extra teacher support? You know, I think people who aren't teachers have this idea that teachers divide kids into groups so that the teacher can sit at their desk and grade papers. Has that ever happened to you? That has never happened to me ever in the history of the world. So you have to be prepared to give more support. You have to be prepared to be walking around constantly. The truth is, for those of us who've been teaching a while, whole group instruction is so much easier than small group instruction. I mean, I could teach you about Romeo and Juliet with half my gray matter tied behind my back. So if I'm going to have the kids working in small groups, I have to be prepared to physically walk all around the class all day long, which my Fitbit will love it. But if I just had surgery on my foot like I did last year, that's not a good thing, right? If I'm in a wheelchair on crutches, then if I'm going to have them break up into things where I need to be able to get around to them, that could be a problem. So I need to be able to give more teacher support, not less. So make sure you're ready for that. Next, I have to say, if collaborative grouping is right, if that's the right thing to do, and I'll talk about different varieties of groups in a little bit, but what kind of grouping is right? So we can consider Are we going to have them be in pairs? Are we going to have them be in triads? Are we going to have them in groups of 4 or 5? So I will tell you what my opinion is. My opinion is that you should always put students in odd numbered groups other than the working in pairs. So groups of 3 or 5, but not 4. And the reason I say that is because it's easier to come to consensus as a group when there are an odd number of students in the group. So if I have 4 kids in the group and 2 have one opinion and 2 have the other, it's hard for the group to come to consensus. It's easy for there to be division, divisiveness, contention, all kinds of icky stuff. So that's the technical pedagogical term, icky stuff. So you don't want that. So if you can just keep the group odd numbered, then you increase the odds that it will be able to come to consensus. And I would say don't put students in groups larger than 5. The reason is, right, I would have to go from 5 to 7. And a group of 7 has a tendency to do this. It's like that phrase from that poem, "The center cannot hold, things fall apart," and where Achebe took the title of his novel from, "Things Fall Apart." But when you have a group that big, the center can't hold, and the group subdivides into a group of 3 and a group of 4. And that's not good. So I really recommend, no matter how old the students, that you not put them in groups larger than 5. Just my recommendation. One of the things that you want to decide in collaborative grouping is, how long is this group going to last? Like, is this just going to be an ad hoc thing for right now, a few minutes, or is this going to be a lasting thing? And I typically set up groups that are going to be used for a certain set of time, either a 6-week grading period or even a whole semester, and I'll set up formal groups of 2, 3, and 5. In addition to that, I'll have ad hoc groups that we'll just do for that day or even a few minutes, right? Go find 2 other people who are born within 60 days of you and form a group, right? And in the handout, I have lots of ideas for how to form groups. But you just have to decide what kind of group is best. And there are lots of choices. So if the work itself is really complex, but the product is small, I want a smaller group. If the work has lots of different parts to it, then I might want a bigger group so that they can divide the work up. So you just have to decide for this activity what kind of group is going to be best. The other thing to consider is the use of a casual cluster. So cluster grouping technically is when we take however many gifted kids we have in that grade, and we sprinkle them evenly throughout the classrooms of that grade level. So if I have 100 fourth graders and I have 4 classrooms, I would put 4, and I have 16 gifted kids out of the 100, then I would put 4 gifted kids in each of the 4 classrooms. So I've got a cluster of gifted kids in each classroom. That works out well because then they always have somebody like-minded to work with. So, but a casual cluster says, okay, I've got 4 gifted kids in my class. She's got 4 gifted kids in her class. He's got 4 gifted kids in his class. And I'm going to take 2 of mine and let them work with 3 of yours. And then I'm going to take my other 2 and let them work with 3 of yours. And you guys, and then we're going to mix them all up so that they get to casually cluster with other kids in the grade. And the reason that we might want to do that is because gifted kids really do deserve the opportunity to work with other gifted kids. And we've already kind of had their world narrowed by the fact that we clustered them out. And so we don't have all 16 of them together. They deserve the opportunity to try to make friends with their cognitive peers. And cluster grouping can let you do that. Will hybrid grouping work here? Hybrid is really jigsaw with an expert. So the Kagan learning strategy of jigsaw, right? So there's work to do and we divide it out. You're person 1, you're person 2, you're person 3, person 4, 5, whatever. In hybrid grouping, how you do it is each person has one of those pieces, but then they divide out, and like person 1, they go meet with all the 1s. Person 2 goes and meets with all the 2s. Person 3 goes and meets with all the 3s, and so on. And then when they're done working in their groups as 1s, 2s, and 3s that are working on the same activity, then they come back together as a large group and as that initial group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the number 1, even if the person who was in role number 1 had the lowest ability of anybody in the group, they're an expert because they're the only ones who knew what group 1 was doing. And somebody else in group one may have been really awesome. And so this person in group one is bringing back great stuff. This can be a really effective way to help gifted kids work with other students who are not quite at their same ability level. We have to have reasonable expectations, right? We can't expect that 2 days into school, we're going to be able to divide kids up into a group and they're going to be able to work without direction, silently for extended periods of time and accomplish all that we want them to. It's just not reasonable, right? It's just not reasonable. Expect that kids in groups, just like adults, are going to have differences. Some are going to work better in groups than others. Some are more naturally herd animals, right? Like some of them, it's just easier for them. Some of them have a stronger work ethic within the group. And so we have to be reasonable about what we expect of them. And that leads us into the second step, which is that we have to teach the skills. We have to overtly teach the skills of working within a group. We can't just hope for the best and then complain later that it all fell apart. And yet often we don't think about explicitly teaching the skills involved in working with a group. And this is one of the parts I think that just my teacher preparation program kind of fell down on the job on. They never taught me this. They never taught me how, like, what are the skills necessary for working in a group and how do I teach that to students? So we have to teach these skills before we put them in a group and just let them go, because otherwise very little work will be done. So here's what needs to be taught. The first skill in working with a group is to learn to listen well. Now, some of this is cultural. Different cultures have different listening modes and different listening manners. So in some cultures, direct eye contact shows that you're listening, right? And that's kind of Western European culture that we have here in North America, is that if I'm listening to you, I'm looking at you. Listening is as much an eye exercise as it is an ear exercise. And so that's something to teach kids. Do you need to look at the person who's speaking? Do we nod? Do we ask questions? Do we take notes? How do we listen well? And some of that's going to depend on how old the kids are, right? Because what is listening well to a 4-year-old looks very different than what's listening well to a 17-year-old. So certain things clue us in that somebody's paying attention to us, right? And we can overtly discuss that with students. So what is the expectation within the group? We have to make sure our students can explain things not only with a how or a what, but also with a why. So we should do it this way, and here's my idea. And the reason we should do that is this. One of the problems comes when students are very adamant about their how or their what and a little iffy on the why. That's where we get contention. And so we need to help kids understand that when they share ideas, they need to share rationale as well. We need to make sure that they can share ideas with clear and concise speech, kind of the equivalent of Strunk White's like right tight, right? We want them to be able to share their ideas without a bunch of circuitous, off-task, tangential talk. We want them to be able to say, this is my idea, boom, boom, boom. Because when you have a bunch of kids in a group, if everybody takes too long, then they waste too much time. So one of the things I like to use for that is graphic organizers. And in your handout, at the end of the handout, I showed a couple graphic organizers that can be done just in Microsoft Office. I mean, if you use Insert, go to the Insert tab, under the Insert tab, on that ribbon, there's a place that says Smart Art. And under Smart Art, you have all different graphic organizers that are there at your fingertips. But I've also included links in the handout to some of my favorite graphic organizer sites. Use graphic organizers to help kids lay out their ideas and their rationale ahead of time so that when they come back to the classroom, or back to the group rather, then they can share their ideas in a way that makes sense to everybody and in a streamlined manner. We have to teach kids to come to consensus. We have to teach them how to come to agreement even if they don't really agree. So how do we do that, right? So maybe for some kids, we have to provide an outlet, right? So you have to come to agreement with your group. If you don't agree with what your group did, then you can write me a note so that I know that wasn't your idea. You have to do that sometimes for gifted learners. It's very important to them that you know that they knew that was wrong. And it's very important to them that they know that you know they knew it was wrong. So you've got to make sure you got that in place. Like, come to consensus with the group, but I'm going to give you an escape hatch so that you can come tell me that you had a difference of opinion so that you feel better. We have to make sure that they share reasoning and not just opinion, right? We talked earlier about not just the what and the how, but the why. But here, the why has to be more than just because I'm smarter than you and I said so. It has to be more than that. It has to be a rationale. And we want to make sure that students know the difference between opinion and rationale. We have to make sure they know how to take turns. And it may be something as actually physically tangible as if you're holding the pencil, then you can talk. If you're not, and then as soon as you're done, you pass it. And maybe we have a little timer, a little sand timer, and it goes around, or the teacher's timing and says, okay, pass the talking stick to someone else. We have to build in time for self-reflection. We have to build in time into the assignment for students to reflect not only on the work that they did, but also their role in the group, other people's role in the group. How did the group dynamic itself work, and how could it be improved in the future? We need to have feedback flowing in and out frequently, positive feedback frequently, and constructive feedback shared gently, right? Sharing it gently. We can provide question and response stems for our students to use. Things like, I'm still not clear on why you want to do it this way. Could you explain that more? Or, I understand this much, but at this point, I'm lost. Or, I understand why you feel that way, yet I still feel we should do it differently, right? So we may have to actually have kids have a sheet of paper in front of them that they can read that kind of thing off of, because it may not come naturally to them. Start small. Don't make the very first time your kids do a group project in class worth 2 test grades, 3 quiz grades, and 15 homework grades, right? That's not fair. The first few times they work in groups, it shouldn't be for a grade at all. You're going to give feedback. You need feedback, evaluation, but no grade. As soon as you put a grade on it, it raises the stakes, and you are evaluating something more than just the activity itself. And so we want to make sure that we give kids a chance to learn how to work within the dynamics of a group before we add on that extra layer of grade pressure. Now, the next thing is we've got to mind our own manners. So one of the things I would say about this is it is inappropriate and unkind to assign group work that must be done by students getting together physically outside of a classroom. I'm going to go out on a limb here and just say should never be done. And the reason I say that is that students don't always have control over their ability to get together outside of the classroom, and it punishes students from struggling, families that are struggling economically, because they may have parents who work 2 or 3 jobs, can't drive them over somewhere after school. They may have to babysit younger siblings. They themselves may work. And so when you start adding in a requirement to get together outside of class, then you're really punishing kids who aren't wealthy. And that's not what we're here for as teachers. So because of living in a digital age, there are lots of things that kids can do outside of class for their group without necessarily being together. I mean, if they're older, if they have internet access at home, then they can use Google Hangout, or even Prezi has a collaboration thing. I'm not a Prezi fan at all, but you could do that. Google Docs will allow multiple students to work in the same document without being in the same place. So you can use tech to overcome those barriers, but be very, very mindful of that. The next step is roles and resources. So I really believe that whenever something's going to be done for a grade, that the teacher should divide that group up. The teacher should be deliberate in how they're assigning kids to work in those groups so that they can make it more likely to be a positive result. So I have more information in the handout on different ways to divide the groups deliberately. you will get a feel for it. I don't set up my groups until maybe 4 or 5 weeks into the school year, where I really feel like I've got a good handle on the different kids' strengths. Once the group is divided up, then I want to do this. I want to create a team identity. So if you look in the handout, and I'm going to pull the handout up for myself so I can see where I'm directing you to. If you look in the handout, on page 2, it says creating team identity. And I have a way that I do it in class. So you'll see where it says categories. And so I have my students, when they get assigned into their group for the first time, so let's say they're working in groups of 3 for the first time, they get together and I'll say game and color, or any 2 of the categories on that sheet, or you can create your own. So the students have to come to consensus on a game they all like and a game they all don't like, a color they all like and a color they all don't like. Then they take that and they use those to make names for their group. Once a group has a name, it's no longer a group, it's a team. And then they create that team identity. And when they turn in their work, then they put the name of that team. So I keep a spreadsheet where I have groups of 2, 3, and 5, and for each class. And in those groups of 2, I have the name of that team above it. So I know what team that is. And I let them put the name of the team on the work as opposed to their own names. Next, use timelines. So the example that I'm showing you here in this PowerPoint is for something going on for several weeks, but especially for students who struggle a little bit with executive functioning, which I would say is like half of our students, right? I did all that work, I just can't turn it in. If they're struggling with executive functioning, it's really, really critical that we break it up into parts that where there's accountability. You have to turn it in and have it checked. We can't wait for a 3-week-long project and then have them all turn it in bulk. Far too many students won't turn it in, and it's not supportive of student success to make it that way. Additionally, though, you can create a timer slide that will count down, and you can download those for free at my website at giftedguru.com. giftedguru.com, under free downloads, I have countdown timer slides that you can download for free, and you just type in the text. You should have gathered your materials by now. You should be on number 2 by now. You should be on number 4 by now. You should be putting the stuff away by now. Time to turn in your work. And it will just count it down for you on a slide that's showing. Those timelines can be really supportive of student success. One of the things that's important to look at is who does what within each group. It's never fair for students to be responsible for the grades of other students. All of the work should be divided up and distinct, so if it's counted for a grade. So what I mean by that is that if I'm turning in work that I did as a group, I get my own grade. I don't get graded based on Sarah's work. That's fair, right? That's fair. It's not fair to give a group grade. I will do group evaluation, but I won't give a group grade. That's one of the fastest ways to develop resentment and to encourage cheating and to encourage GT kiddos to take over for everybody else. One of the things that's really critical is that students be able to answer this question: what is my role in this group, and what is our goal as a group? Any administrator walking into the classroom, a teacher walking over to the group, should be able to ask any student in that group, what is your role in this group? And what is your goal as a group? And each student should be able to answer that. If they can't, then we haven't completely done our jobs. So I have a few ideas. Now, I mentioned earlier that tech tools like Prezi and Google Docs will allow students to work collaboratively, even when they're not in the same place. And those aren't the only options, but they're a great place to start. Group work can occur in students who aren't even in the same class if you can let them use tech. For instance, one student can film something, somebody else can do the editing, somebody else can do the writing part of it. One of the things I really like to use is blogs. And the platform that I use for classroom blogging is I don't know how you pronounce it. EduBlogs, EDU blogs. It's EDU blogs. Why do I like it? Designed for teachers, built-in safety and security, privacy. You have total control. You can see the back end of all your students' blogs. It's free. I like it. Now, they have a freemium model. I usually paid, when I first started doing it was like $10 a year or something to get rid of the ads and stuff. But I really like blogging. And on the screen, on the PowerPoint slide right now, what you're seeing is a screenshot of a blog from one of my actual students who continued her blog even after school was over and she had graduated from high school. Blogging is so fantastic for group work. She was on a blog that 6 students were maintaining this blog. And this is one of those things where she's in a group, but she's in a group with kids who aren't even necessarily in her class. But because of technology, they can all work on the same blog together. I really love collaborative testing. So I'm going to direct you to the handout. I'm going to pull it up myself so that we can see collaborative testing. So I got this idea from a book called like the ABCs of Assessment or something. It was really fun. So you will see it down on page 4, and it goes through a collaborative test on tornadoes. So what I want you to notice if you look through this is that it has the students flowing in and out of the group as they answer the questions on the test. So they may have one question that they're answering just themselves, then they're getting group input, then the group is answering a question together, then they're coming back and answering a question by themselves. Why do I believe in group testing? Because number one, it lowers the stress level, it lowers test anxiety. How hard could it be if I'm working in a group? And yet it can be actually really quite difficult. I'm going to show you an example. Well, I'm going to show you a couple things on this one, and then I'm going to show you an example of how you could do it even in AP level class. I was sharing this seminar with a group of teachers, and one of them taught AP biology. And she said, you could never do that with AP biology. And I said, oh, yes, you could. And so I showed her how, and I'm going to show you. But first, I want to point out a couple things on this one on the tornado. Notice that it says, question number 3, which of the following tools is most important to use? And then the student puts it in their rank order. Then my group's rank order is this. That's one of those things I talked about making sure that when they come to consensus as a group, you give the student an out. Here I gave the student out. Their rank order can be different than the other class. And then notice on question 4, you can differentiate for gifted learners or struggling learners by who you assign to what role within the group and how challenging that question is. So you're not always going to make the struggling student group or student 1 or member number 1 or 2 or 3. You want to change that around a lot. Notice that there's a lot of evaluation and synthesis in here. Notice that there are a lot of places where students can share their own reasoning. Okay, so now I'm going to pull up the AP Bio one. And you'll have access to this one as well. So in this one, now this is only going to make sense really if you teach AP Biology, but you get the idea of how you can make this even complex for even complex levels of content. Group testing is not something just for kindergarten. This is something you can do through AP senior level stuff if you wanted to. So in the AP Bio example, we have student number 1, define population. Student number 2, compare and contrast population and community. Student number 3, what limits an ecosystem? Okay, so each of them answer that together. Working together, please respond. Describe the difference between a community and an ecosystem. So community here has a specific meaning in AP Bio. Individually, on a scale of 1 to 5, how strongly do you agree with your group's definition? Again, I got to give them an out all the time, right? Individually, I ask questions, and then as a group, list 3 elements of ethology. Individually evaluate which is most representative of the concept of it. Then as a group, arrive at the correct answer to the question and circle it, and then select any wrong answer and make it correct, right? So you can let them be working in and out of the group, even on high levels of things. And I highly recommend it. I highly recommend collaborative test taking as a way to see what students really can do. Remember that you want them to do fun stuff first as a group. I mentioned that I don't take grades on anything for the first few weeks. And the reason is that it just takes away a lot of the pressure if you don't make them have a grade. The next thing is rubrics. You want to evaluate their work in a group. And so in the handout, I share an evaluation instrument that they can use for an inside-outside circle group, whether if you do AVID strategies on your campus, this would be Socratic seminar, philosophical chair, but I use just this inside-outside circle. So how it works is I have one group of students in the circle, another group outside the circle. Each student in the circle has a student outside the circle who's evaluating them. So the student inside the circle is participating in the discussion. The student outside the circle is evaluating how many times does my partner here ask a question? How many times do they respond to another question? How many times do they engage in sidebar, right? And they evaluate them. And then I give a little space at the bottom for them to give feedback of what would you have said if you were participating in that discussion. Then I have them switch, and the people who are outside the circle come in, inside the circle go out. Now, they do not switch on evaluating each other, meaning if Jose was on the inside of the circle and Sarai was evaluating him, when Sarai goes to the inside of the circle, Jose doesn't evaluate Sarai. Otherwise, you get into this quid pro quo, right? I'll rate you high, you rate me high. And that's not what I want. And so they'll do a fruit basket turnover there. But it's very important to help students learn the skills of working in a group discussion if they get feedback on how well they did. And by having other students give that feedback, then it's not just you, it's not just subjective, and it enables you to facilitate the actual discussion and keep the discussion going rather than having to deal with evaluating how are these students doing on the discussion itself. So I hope you found these tips and ideas useful. I really feel like the use of effective grouping in a class, when you can do it, it's so empowering as a teacher. You really do feel like a good teacher when you can do that. When you can effectively run small groups, that is a high-level teaching skill. And it's something that's appreciated not only by administrators, but also by students and by their parents. And I would just like to say, especially by GT kiddos who often get a bad rap for not having social skills, when really it's not their fault. They're being put in untenable situations by teachers who are making them responsible for other people's grades or who don't explicitly teach the skills of working in a group. You can make a real difference in the lives of students by using effective grouping practices. I hope that you found all of the resources in the handout helpful, and I hope that you enjoyed this session. Best of luck to you in your teaching practice.
How well do you think you were trained in small group instruction? Write your response in the field below. Please note that responses to reflective questions will be viewable by others taking this course and may be accessed by your administrators. When you are finished, click Submit. What practices can you implement to improve your students' ability to work in small groups? Write your response in the field below. When you are finished, click Submit. How will you divide students into groups? Write your response in the field below. When you are finished, click Submit. From what you have just heard, please reflect on the following questions. Please choose the correct answers and click on Submit to enter your response. Please take a few minutes to complete this short evaluation so that we may continue to develop professional development that meets your needs. Congratulations! You have completed the course Grouping Without Fear, Small Group Instruction in the Classroom by Lisa Van Gemert. To successfully record your completion of this course, close this window. Then, click the Refresh button on the course launch page.